Hi, everyone. This is Sandra Alexander, and I'm inviting right out of the chute a lovely lady who has called in to talk with us today on the Autism Spiritual Approach virtual grand opening for our radio show. And her name is Andrea Libutti. And Andrea, are you there? Can we hear you?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can, and I'm so excited to have you. I wanted to invite you in right away as I'm introducing Autism, the Spiritual Approach, on this radio show because, as you know, you and I are kindred spirits in this work, and I just want folks to hear a little bit about you and kind of about us together. You know, I don't want this to be the Sandra show right from the very beginning. The listeners will have the opportunity to kind of find out the how of this, you know, Andy, how do we inject spirit into our work with children on the autism spectrum, and how do we connect with spirit ourselves in order to be able to do that work more effectively. So could you just start by introducing yourself and tell everybody kind of why you called in and what spirit is all about with you?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Sandra. I love what you're doing. And I have to tell you, as a physician, it's been a little bit of a long road for me to be brave enough to come out of the so-called spiritual closet. But I have to tell you, it is the most exciting, gratifying, favorite part of talking about autism for me, and that's the spiritual essence of these kids and how parents can look at them from this broader perspective. And, you know, my background is, you know, mother to 3 boys. My oldest boy has autism. He's 12. And he inspired me to write the book Awakened by Autism, which was published by Hay House last year, or actually 2 years ago now. But it really was an awakening for me, not so much to necessarily just who he was, but to who we all are from a broader perspective. And that was after a good 5 years of really just focusing on the physical issues and getting to a point where I said, there has to be something bigger, broader going on here. And through working with a shaman in Vermont, she actually opened my eyes and I went, wow, what is all this stuff? What does it mean to be you know, a spiritual being having a human experience, and what does that mean for my child, and what's going on here? So that's sort of, you know, my short summary of where I am now. But I think, Sandra, having a platform like this and, you know, being able to bridge the two worlds, you know, your background being a much more spiritual slant, if you will, than my background in training, which was a very, you know, scientific, you know, Western sort of model. So it's sort of fun to come together and bridge the two.
Well, and I love the word bridge that you're using because, you know, that's part of our process is, you know, my background, as you alluded to, is in spiritual counseling. But I found myself, you know, on the floor in early childhood with these kiddos that had these clear alternative ways of operating, you know. And I know that we call them challenges in the educational world and all of that, but it really is more alternative. And what I love is, and especially in your book, is that you address all of the potential possibilities from the physical to the metaphysical. I love the way that you have a chapter that says belief trumps everything. And you also talk about when we approach working with these children in fear, as opposed to in love, that's really where we put up, you know, our blocks. And so my deep desire for this show going forward is, you know, there's a lot of parents out there that are walking a very spiritual path. But when it comes to injecting spirit into their work with the kids and even in day-to-day life, the big question is how? How do we do that? You know, I mean, am I supposed to go meditate longer? Am I supposed to be a better person? what does that look like? And so the reason we came up with these 4 steps and the autism spiritual approach is to put a toolbox together so maybe parents, educators, therapists, doctors can start answering the question, how?
Yeah.
And I'm seeing also, I do believe that we have a gentleman we both know on phone, so let me see if I can get him on at the same time.
Sure.
Nguyen, are you there?
Here I am.
Wonderful.
Hey, Nguyen.
Andy.
How are you?
I have you.
We're doing awesome now that we're together, yeah.
That's great. Thank you both for calling in. This is so exciting to have you both, because really in my heart and in my mind, you two have really launched this concept in such a successful way. I met you both through the Awaken to Autism Summit that happened last November, and then hopefully when you do a replay, I'd love to get you on here again and do some promoting with that. But what I discovered is when you did the summit, you held the summit online and you co-hosted it, and you brought 20 of us on to talk about autism and spirit and what that connection really was and how that looked, and the just enormous number of choices that we have and that we can offer parents and educators and therapists out there of how to go about making this a holistic practice. And what the gift that I got from you putting together this summit was, like you just mentioned earlier, Andy, I felt incredibly isolated and really scared about coming forth as a professional and saying, look, there's so much more to this. And you know what? Because of the two of you and because of that summit is why I'm doing this. I'm not finding it so frightening anymore.
That's awesome. Yeah, that is so awesome. Well, I have to credit Nguyen with being the brave one, because he came to me and said he really wanted to do a spiritual autism summit, and I thought, okay, here's another doctor that's willing to be brave. I'm going to do it with him. So it was like Nguyen allowing me to feel safe, and I'm so glad that you now feel, like you can do all your wonderful work, Sandra, with this radio show.
Well, and I think between all of us, that my goal is that we're going to be making parents and teachers and therapists and other doctors feel safe in being able to pose these options and not have it sound so, as I had one person refer to it, a pediatrician. She said, it's not high woo-woo after all. So I'm hoping, together we can have people come out and talk about how they feel about this and feel safe integrating the spirit piece, because that's really what makes it happen. Nguyen, could you speak to it? Could you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you came to this and what you feel about the whole thing at this point? You went through a lot of work putting that summit together and gathered a lot of information.
Well, definitely, I couldn't do it without Andy and you guys helping me. But definitely, I come from a more conventional background, and yes, I was kind of interested in some of this stuff before I finished my training. But I actually was pulled into the whole thing because my son manifested with what we call autism, and that led, because of my frustration with what I was getting from the conventional world, I decided to look further and deeper, and came upon all these different things. And I want to stress that I'm a person who is going through it with other parents. I don't have all the answers, but I think that putting out into the open encourages other people to also explore other things. And so I felt really that my son compelled me to look into these things and open my mind up and grow spiritually, so to speak, and in other ways to help my patients, which I actually have done now. Now that I've looked in some of these alternative things, I can speak from that perspective. And many times they're just like, oh, I'm so happy that you talked to me, because I was afraid to talk to you about a certain spiritual aspect or belief system. So I'm a person who's going through, I'm still learning, but I just felt really drawn to bring this forward, working with Andy to bring the speakers that we have to talk about what we go through as parents, as caregivers, and what kind of things we've learned and benefited from our children. So, and again, I'm an internal medicine doctor, so at first I was like, this is kids. This is totally an alien subject to me, And Andy, you're an emergency room physician, and so she sees all types of people. But if there's a problem, you really want Andy on your side. You have a medical issue that's emergent, you want Andy there. But I think we're a little bit outside of the whole pediatric kind of psychiatric, neurologic realm, so we can see from a little bit different perspective. But we understand the aspect of conventional thinking as well. So we use that to temper our things that we investigate and things that we bring forward to patients and people who ask us about, whoever asks about autism and spiritual combined. So I don't know. Did that answer your question? I kind of long-winded.
No, it's fabulous, and you speak from the heart, you both do, and that's one of the things that drew me to you to begin with. And so what I want to do for the audience, and I know that you have limited schedules, so pipe up and let me know if you need to go, and I will absolutely let you go, but I will keep you as long as you're willing to be kept. Yes. We end at 12:30. But what I'd like to do is throw out, so people are hearing, okay, what about this 4-step process? So I'd like to briefly throw out what that means, and then get some feedback from each of you on, what step do you think, that you find most useful if you're using it, because I know that these 4 steps are not foreign to anybody, and I certainly didn't make them up. I kind of got messages from the kids that I was working with on what their needs were, and then put these steps together as a way to sort of a template. So when we tell parents to integrate spirit, they can sort of go into this toolbox and pick and choose some of these fun activities and tools to use that help them do that in a practical way. But I'd like to know what you think about these particular steps, and then at the same time, our listeners can hear what they are. Does that sound all right?
Sure.
Okay. So the first step, because it's the foundation of all of we do, is balancing our energy bank account, and we have a process of doing that like we balance our checking account. And it really is to teach the adult to walk through the day with an energy consciousness of where am I getting burnt out, where am I allowing things to come into my life that just are not good for me or good for my child. And so an awareness, if we don't even have the energy to do the work, and neither does the child or the children in our care, the first thing we have to do is get some energy. So that's the first step. The second step is something we created called the spirit temperament. There's 9 of them, and if we take the test, we'll find out some of the environmental needs based on Ayurvedic medicine that our body needs, and some of the things that will throw us completely off. So we're talking about pace, we're talking about temperature, we're talking about diet, we're talking about scents, aromatherapy. So, we want to know then that there's not some real heavy-duty irritant in the environment that is preventing the child from connecting with us or accepting some of the traditional therapies that we're trying to apply. The third aspect is the behavior aspect. And Andy, I think, your fear versus love fits right here. It's exactly the same thing. And it's how do we identify the unmet need deeply within the child's what we would consider challenging behavior, and then meet that need so that the behavior is not their way of communicating with us that need. And then last, which is my very favorite step, and sometimes where we start, are all the therapeutic visualizations. You talked about bridging, Andy, the physical world and the spiritual aspect and the metaphysical world. And so one of our meditations has been to look at the autism spectrum as a long bridge that goes from here to there, and to make the assumption that our child or the children in our care, and even we from day to day, are hanging out on that bridge to one extent or the other. Are we right here on this side of the bridge? Are we halfway across? Are we lost in the woods on the other side? Making those type of visualizations, even imagining that our thoughts, for instance, are a marquee running across our forehead that children can read, is a big deal in how we're viewing our kids, because you know as well as I do how sensitive they are to what we're feeling and what we're thinking. So sometimes our biggest challenge is to balance ourselves and make sure that we're okay, because these kids tend to want to connect with us and absorb what we're feeling. So those are the 4 steps, and the reason that they all exist is because one sort of is a foundation and underpinning of the other, so that if we're using some of the metaphysical tools and they're not working the way we might like, if we feel like, well, I'm not really connecting to the child the way I'd like to, then we need to go back through step 3 or step 2, or even go back to the basic energy. And so it's not like, we're asking anyone to say, okay, start with step 1 and do this, and then go to step 2 and do that, because, don't we all have enough on our plate? That's just an awful lot. And so what we suggest that a parent or an educator, a therapist, intuitively go through these and get a sense of what would feel like fun. I think I'm going to try this tomorrow. And almost looking forward to getting up in the morning tomorrow because you have something new to try. So that's kind of for the audience, and I know that you're both already familiar with these steps, but I'd love to hear what you think, and not just how great it is, but what is maybe one of the more valuable steps, and one that you may have tried even with your own kids that you found a bit challenging. I would love to hear that from you.
Sure. Do you want to go first, Lynn, or you want me to go?
No, go ahead, Annie. Go ahead.
Well, I love all of the steps, but I can comment. The first thing that comes to mind is the visualization, the 4th step. That's so important in terms of 1, 2, and 3 as well, because when you, I like what you said about, imagine a marquee going across the wavelengths or whatever, what your thoughts are across a marquee, and that the children can read this. And, what we're thinking, what we're feeling is probably, I'm going to go out on a limb here, the most important thing that will affect our child. What we actually think about them on a daily basis, what we actually believe about them on a daily basis, but also, the programming that's being played on a regular basis in our mind. So harnessing our thoughts and really trying to, not tackle them and get rid of the negative ones so much, but rather than, trying to analyze them, just sort of what I think is helpful is just sort of, okay, this is what is. What if I just turn away from what is because it's causing me to be fearful, or it's causing me to think, my God, my kid's going to be stuck like this forever. My kid's doing weird things. I don't understand. So instead of focusing on what is, turn your focus away and say, what if? What if I were able to connect with him? What if I were able to figure out what the behaviors were? What would that look like? What if we just had this wonderful connection where we were playing together and doing X, Y, Z? So I guess the biggest, suggestion I can make for parents is to turn away from what is, not that you don't want to work on challenges, but that's a different topic, and focus on what it is that, you think would feel good. What would it feel like if your child were thriving? What would it feel like if you had a great connection with them? What would a beautiful educational system look like? So really turning away from what is and focusing on what you want. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I love what you say about how that makes you feel, because we know, we can just use the nightmare or good dream analogy for this. When we have a nightmare, it affects our physiology. The adrenaline runs. We wake up, feeling our body is just stressed to the max. And so, what you're suggesting and what this process offers is to, when you go there, it's not really about working on, okay, I'm going to visualize this and it's going to happen tomorrow or the next day. But it's really how you feel, how it makes your physiology change just visualizing that. And then that just automatically, it's kind of like you're the log on the fire and your child is the kindling. And so as you are igniting more and more positivity and hope, then that translates to your child as well.
Yeah. And the side effect is wonderful. You start feeling better. You stop worrying about, all the problems or issues, and you just sort of, practice it, even if it's for a minute a day or a couple minutes a day, where you can just start getting into a better feeling place, because that is going to be huge ripples to your child, send out huge ripples, to your own life and your child, and they'll pick up on it.
Yeah, and they do. They absolutely do. Nguyen, what do you think? What's your favorite or least favorite? Because I know that you really have been trying it all.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said, Andy. And from my perspective, just taking a kind of a lighthearted approach will help immensely. And that's what we were trying to do with the summit. Is, from my perspective, was trying to give it, because it's pretty overwhelming for parents to say, there's so many things out there and there's so many problems, and where do I start first? And first, you shift your kind of your intent, knowing that you're doing the best you can for the child and taking a lighthearted approach. In terms of me and Andy, we crossed paths because we were looking for a way to put more into our bank account, because we were, burnt out, and we were trying to find things for ourselves. And we found that it also, through the medical medium, for instance, that there are ways to help our kid. And so that opened all sorts of doors up to us in terms of trying to take care of ourselves, our health, and look for ways that would be beneficial for us to regain health so we can take care of our child.
Yeah, and we've so I'd like the listeners to go with two just action items, like if you want to call it that, or tools to go away with, but that marquee visualization, or just really holding ourselves accountable that our thoughts and the way we're seeing things really are running a marquee across our forehead. And so it doesn't just apply to our kids. I mean, when we're out in public, it also affects the way people feel and are around us when we feel differently. We can really, this is kind of a change the world visualization as much as it is working with our kids. And the other I'd like for folks to consider is imagining that the spectrum being a bridge. We have had one therapist, one parent after the other spend a few nights just visualizing that bridge before they go to sleep. And they imagine themselves walking across that bridge in the visual, and sometimes they encounter a visual that their child is there. And especially for nonverbal children, we have had parents actually have verbal conversations with their children across the bridge, because the parents, the kids really can, and I had one therapist that just, was just told by the child, I just need such and such. I just need that. And so when the child showed up in the therapist's office, I don't know whether it was bubbles or balloons, or I honestly don't remember, but whatever it was, I need this to feel safe. The therapist had it in her office before she ever met the child. And the child shows up, and, it was astounding, the connection between the therapist and the child, because the child recognized the therapist. It was that simple, that it was a true, so we talk about visualization to create things, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I've been over that bridge, and I know that it's a real place, and it takes us to a different dimension, and that's the dimension where these babies feel safe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to add to that, when I did the visualization, the bridge visualization, I initially, because my son likes bubbles and stuff. I mean, and I visualized the bridge as made of bubbles, and I think it worked. But then, I need to change because I know that his likes and dislikes will change too. So not just keep on doing bubbles, we'll do whatever else that comes into the picture, and we have the flexibility to change the visualization of however they present. Across the bridge to us.
Yeah, and I love the question that always comes up is that, wait a minute, do I need to visualize something specific? Am I am I creating this visualization, or am I an observer in another world? And, really going over that bridge with an open heart and an open mind and believing what you see can be much more powerful than trying to visualize something that you want to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I don't know if this is a good word for it, but I just think it's fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a fun trip to make.
Yeah. It makes you feel so much better too. So you're really doing two really good things, feeling better and helping your child.
Well, just knowing that just your thoughts will affect them. Well, this is really kind of like, at least I'm doing something, right? Because there's 10 things to do. At least doing this is easy to do and not something I have to do, but it's some beneficial as well.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's it's not just one more thing on the plate, and and I think even if we don't feel that connection, even if we don't necessarily believe it right away, I think we can just know from the bottom of our hearts that our child knows we're making an effort to get them to be closer to them, and that's no small thing. That's no small thing. Yeah. Well, you two, we have actually taken up our 30 minutes, and thank you so much for being here. Oh my gosh, I'm just I can't wait to download this and share it with everybody who will listen. And thank you, listeners, for who were on the phone and were on the air listening to us. Andy, I just want to put out one more time, Awakened by Autism. It's a beautiful book that's available on Amazon. And what is your website, my dear?
That's my name, AndreaLibutti.com. So it's AndreaLibutti.com.
Thank you so much. And Nguyen, thank you so much. So many blessings to both of you, and I know that we'll stay in very close touch.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.